Hunter x Hunter is a story almost entirely built on mirrors. Togashi obsessively illustrates both sides of the coin, and you'd be hard-pressed to find something in this manga, whether it be a character, idea, or anything really, that isn't paired with a near equal opposite. This obsession with mirrors is even in the very title of the story, and of all the juxtaposing dynamics present within Hunter x Hunter, my absolute favorite has to be the dynamic between Hisoka and Chrollo, the extremely individualistic jester who dances chaotically to his own tune versus the pitch-perfect representation of collectivism, the calculated leader of a band of thieves whose identity hinges upon others, the Grim Reaper versus the Phantom Troop, the magician versus the spider, the author of his own destiny versus the servant of fate. Hisoka is a one-man circus of chaos, wholly devoted to a singular pursuit, which is paradoxically the chase after his ever-changing desires. He lives for satisfaction and personal thrill, and what he deems satisfying is fluid and constantly changing. However, what doesn't change is his response to these instincts. He engages with life as a game where everybody has to play whether they like it or not, and so it is very fitting that he styles himself as a magician, from the card symbols on his outfits or the cards he uses to fight. He constantly performs elaborate tricks that could easily be mistaken for magic by the ignorant, and this manner of presenting himself is accentuated by his whimsical demeanor. In this game of life where levels are determined by your power, Hisoka thinks of himself as the strongest. Even if that may be irrational or foolish of him, it's simply another way his freedom is reinforced. The man can best be described as a true individualist. He needs nothing but himself, utterly self-serving and completely unhindered by any cause or construct. He is flexible, capable of serving whatever role he so wishes to serve, completely unshackled even by the narrative he exists within. He has been friend and foe, observer and instigator, examiner and examinee, yet these opposites all exist in perfect harmony. You would struggle to find a character in any story with as much narrative flexibility as Hisoka Moro, for he has no allegiance to any ideology, no loyalty to any faction, and no concern for anything outside of his personal pleasure. The most consistent trait of Hisoka's is his inconsistency, his refusal to be pinned down. The only arc where he serves as a true central antagonist is Heaven's Arena, a setting that is wholly representative of his way of life, to the point where I would call the place a physical embodiment of Hisoka's philosophy, a tower you climb by defeating your opponents in 1v1 battles, with floors 200 and above having 0 cash prize, the only reward being victory and the self-satisfaction that accompanies it. Most nen techniques reflect the character they are associated with, and bungee gum exemplifies Hisoka's malleability. It stretches, it snaps, it sticks. It can be used to bluff, trap, bind, or escape. And just like the gum, Hisoka stretches to fulfill any role the narrative demands. Bungee gum and Texture Surprise are named after candy brands he enjoyed as a child, this tiny detail being the only thing we know of Hisoka's background. After all, he speaks little of his past because he is uninterested in it. In a story with a child protagonist whose journey is very much a coming of age, in a story that painstakingly explores the impacts of one's upbringing on their character, Hisoka is an anomaly. The past is utterly meaningless to him, and the same can be said for the future. Hisoka lives entirely in the now, unburdened by what has happened and what could happen, in the fatalistic sense. Of course, he plants seeds for himself, saplings that could bud into satisfaction for him down the line, toys for him to play with. That's the entire basis of his dynamic with Gon and so many others, but rarely will you catch Hisoka wholly committed to any specific future, for he operates as if above fate. The York New City arc explores this to a great extent with the fortune-telling plot. Chrollo uses Neon's ability to read fortunes for all of the Phantom Troop members, including Hisoka, who was unfaithfully among them at the time, and the prophecy he received actually exposed his treachery, hinting at his betrayal by predicting that he would fight Chrollo the following Tuesday, by which time half the spider would be dead. In other words, fate itself sends a warning that Hisoka's duel with Chrollo is imminent and intertwined with the Phantom Troop's doom. But does Hisoka simply accept this written destiny? Of course not. In an incredibly meta fashion, he uses texture surprise to tamper with the poem and forge a fake prophecy moments after receiving the real one. This is especially cool in the manga, given that he is literally reproducing the texture of paper and ink, the primary components of the medium he exists within. Hisoka literally rewrites his fate and arguably the trajectory of the story itself, turning a prophecy of his betrayal into a tool to further that very betrayal. As a result, Chrollo and the others are deceived into keeping him around, playing right into his hands. This is the terror of Hisoka and his almost transcendent self-determination. To the magician, fate is simply another plaything to manipulate, not an inevitability to fear. In the climax of the arc, as Hisoka's painstaking scheming finally brings him to his desired outcome, the battle with Chrollo, we get an almost pitch-perfect depiction of his character, his relationship with fate, and his flexibility. Chrollo is rendered nameless by Kurapika's chain, and just like that, everything Hisoka was working for has been rendered meaningless and no longer matters. But he doesn't stress over it. He doesn't lose his shit. He just hits us with the most hilarious expression of surprise, and that's it. Hisoka simply postpones the duel, for he is not interested in broken toys. And what comes next is just as crucial, as he smirks to Pakunoda, knowing that the present differs from the contents of his fortune. Fate said he'd fight Chrollo on a Tuesday and that half of the troop would be dead. Not only did they not fight, but it wasn't even a Tuesday, and of course only Uvogin was killed, which took place before the prophecy. Every step we take amends our fate. Those are Hisoka's final words in the Yorknu City arc, a proclamation that fate lies beneath his feet. It is not an unchangeable endpoint, but a shadow cast by the choices of those who walk. Even death isn't enough to tame his indomitable will. In the Heaven's Arena deathmatch, which we'll explore in more detail later in the video, Hisoka actually dies, blown to pieces by Chrollo's onslaught of explosive puppets. Yet, through sheer nen mastery and willpower, Hisoka defies death itself. Following the battle, Shaonak and Machi examine Hisoka's lifeless, disfigured body and conclude that he perished from suffocation. But as Machi begins to stitch his wounds, his aura suddenly flares back to life. In his final moments, Hisoka set a contingency, placing bungee gum on his own heart and lungs and commanding the gum to jumpstart them after they had stopped. Simply put, his nen persisted beyond death to resuscitate him. He refuses to accept a fate he did not choose. Hisoka's reaction to literal death is not fear, but a playful irritation that things didn't go as he wanted. He immediately vows that moving forward, his victims won't have a choice in where or how they fight. From now on, he will decide the when and where and who of his battles, and he demonstrates this handily by taking his first victim's life, Kortopi, in the damn toilet. For Hisoka, destiny is something you craft for yourself, whether by grooming a rival like Gon, forging fate's script, or even clawing back from beyond the grave. He asserts total control over his story. Sometimes a villain, sometimes an ally, but always marching to the beat of his own drum. A solo player by nature, and every system he interacts with, he inevitably undermines in favor of self-satisfaction. Where Hisoka rejects fate, Chrollo is its most devout servant. The Phantom Troop is his church, Meteor City is his origin myth, and the Book of Nen abilities he carries is his gospel. Chrollo is a character defined by collective purpose and a fatalistic worldview. As the leader of the Phantom Troop, aka the Spider, he sees himself only as a part of that greater whole. The troop does not tolerate individualism. Each member is a leg, and the death of one should be inconsequential so long as the body moves. That is their ideal. Immediately you can see how Chrollo exists in stark contrast to Hisoka, who cares only for himself. Chrollo's ideology revolves around a group. The troop's survival and mission come before anything, including his own life. life. He once plainly stated that he is only part of the spider, and there will be times when the legs are more important than the head. Chrollo doesn't just lead the group, he is the group. His ideology is rooted in collectivism to the point of spiritual fusion. The loss of a troop member is not just the loss of a soldier, it's the amputation of a limb. And while Chrollo is the heart of this family, he notably never places himself above it. Even he can be replaced. During his brief battle with Zeno and Silver, Chrollo shows absolutely no fear of death, even with a family to lead and to live for. Melody's interpretation of his heartbeat substantiates this. He is wholly accepting of death. In fact, he enjoys that death is always by his side. This almost nihilistic indifference towards his own life stands in very stark contrast to Hisoka's obsessive grasp on his life. Chrollo's Nen ability is perhaps my favourite in the entire story as it pertains to characterization. Skill Hunter represents Chrollo's lack of an identity, as well as his search for meaning through others. Using the conjured book, Chrollo can steal and use the Nen abilities of other people, and with Nen being synonymous to one's identity, this can be seen as Chrollo literally erasing the individuality of others and absorbing it into himself. He is an amalgamation of other people's identities and skills. He builds his own self by absorbing facets of those he encounters, effectively rendering him a walking anthology of other people's lives. A smaller scale example of this can be seen in his knowledge of various languages as a child in Meteor City, rummaging through the trash he calls home in search of knowledge. And therein lies the crux of his character and the most blatant contrast with Hisoka. Chrollo is utterly hollow. He lacks a self, a core of his own. He isn't defined by who he is, but by what he steals, a void filled only by others. Hisoka exists entirely for himself, whereas Chrollo exists entirely for others and because of others. A man defined by collective influence rather than original individuality. Unlike the Jester, who relishes his own unique powers tracing back to his childhood, Chrollo's unique power is the ability to curate a library of others' Nen abilities. Yet there is a slight caveat there, as Hisoka cares very little for his past, while Chrollo is completely defined by it, and Meteor City, as this trash bag of a region, was a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds. Skill Hunter raises an intriguing question about Chrollo's identity at the time we meet him. Who is Chrollo Lucifer? We see him reading antique books or silently observing the world, as if searching for a purpose beyond theft and violence. He showcases a deep interest in fortune-telling and prophecies in his conversation with Neon Nostrade. When Gon confronts him in Yorknew, demanding to know how he can kill innocents so shamelessly, Chrollo doesn't respond with anger but with questions of his own, directed towards himself. He is contemplative, questioning, and constantly searching for some semblance of self-comprehension. Who is Chrollo Lucifer is a question I cannot hope to answer precisely because Chrollo Lucifer has spent a lifetime searching for the answer to that question. One of the most defining traits of Chrollo's is his belief in fate, one that is taken to the point of servitude. Many view Chrollo as a slave of fate, and while this reading does have a lot of merit, I prefer to think of him as a willful follower of destiny, which in of itself raises a very interesting question. How does one willingly choose to serve a concept that is centered around the absence of choice? That's another one of the many conundrums attached to this deeply enigmatic figure. Chrollo went out of his way to obtain Lovely Ghostwriter specifically to guide the Phantom Troop's actions. He uses the ability to foresee danger and make decisions to protect his comrades. When the Fortunes warn that if they pursue the Chain User, more members of the Phantom Troop will die, Chrollo takes the prophecy very seriously. He immediately plans to leave Yorknew by nightfall to avoid their fated deaths. So he is by no means locked into fate, and tries his hardest to tamper with it for the sake of his loved ones, adopting a fatalistic pragmatism. If he were a slave, he would not try to tamper with the inevitable. He believes in the prophecy but tries to change it, altering the spider's course to avoid this doomed outcome. And of course, Hisoka, who cares very little for such concepts, manipulates the fortune-telling session to flip Chrollo's plan on its head, forcing them to stay in Yorknew. At the end of the arc, he is stripped of his nen by Kurapika, which poses yet another interesting conundrum when it comes to interpreting the character. As previously stated, nen is synonymous with one's identity, yet Chrollo's ability is specifically the consumption of other people's nen, and by extension, their identities, rendering him with no identity of his own when you take that train of thought to its natural conclusion. So the loss of his nen, the loss of what should be his identity, ends up being far more convoluted than it would be for 99% of the cast. What's especially noteworthy though is that the very first thing Chrollo does upon losing his nen is to head east, in accordance with Neon's prophecy, which states that he would find a new friend. He would find the one most needed in that direction. Which essentially means that when his nen is lost, when he is taken outside the fold of the supernatural world and rendered a mere mortal, when he loses the representation of what should be his identity, the servant of fate still remains, as if to say this is the truest core of his character, something that cannot be removed no matter what. Chrollo's collectivist mindset also shows in how he views people and uses people. Especially in the heat of combat, Chrollo can be incredibly cold and utilitarian. By his own admission, he sees no difference between a puppet and a person. Individuals are merely objects or pieces on a board, instruments in the symphony of destiny. It's not that Chrollo is inherently cruel for the joy of it, but rather that he has depersonalized the world, which arguably even includes himself and his family, aptly named after an animal, the spider, and whose abilities he makes use of in the battle against Hisoka, where he compares people to puppets. Rather than a contrast, this is actually a big similarity between himself and Hisoka, who views all people as toys for the sake of his own personal pleasure. The difference lies in the reason they hold this perspective regarding others. Chrollo will use and sacrifice strangers and innocents if it serves the spider's ends or aligns with fate, whereas Hisoka will do it just because. Slaughtering the mafia auction attendees in the iconic Requiem for Uvogin is purely to send a message and fulfill what he saw as the destiny of that night. During the duel with Hisoka, Chrollo literally converts bystanders in the arena into puppets to attack Hisoka, almost as a demonstration that he truly means what he said. To Chrollo, those people might as well be lifeless pawns, and this is a terrifying level of detachment, one shaped from Chrollo's Meteor City upbringing with their slogan of "We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything from us," and of course the brutal experiences that forged the troupe, which tie into the aforementioned slogan. They are outcasts who survived a hellhole in their youth and vowed vengeance upon those who mutilated their friend. They became killers to retaliate against a cruel world. Chrollo's fatalism partly comes from seeing life as inherently expendable or fated for sacrifice. He's a character who almost worships the collective idea of the spider, an ideal that transcends any one person, and fate is simply the web they are all caught in. Chrollo is defined by his past and constantly concerned with the future, i.e. fate, in complete opposition to Hisoka, who lives completely in the moment. After years of anticipation, Hisoka finally gets his wish to fight Chrollo one-on-one in a deathmatch, but the encounter is far from the gratifying duel he envisioned. Instead, the fight turns out to be the ultimate mockery of everything Hisoka stands for. Chrollo, true to his methodical nature, stacks every odd in his favor. He agrees to fight at Heaven's Arena in front of a crowd, not out of bravado but meticulous preparation. Chrollo immediately takes control of the flow of the battle, literally. As soon as the referee announces the start, Chrollo uses Shaunok's black voice to puppet the referee and turn him against Hisoka. This shocking opener catches Hisoka off guard. Chrollo had been avoiding Hisoka since getting his nen back, gathering abilities in secret to ensure victory. Hisoka easily disables the puppet referee, only for the corpse to explode, revealing Chrollo had placed sun and moon seals, which is another stolen nen ability, to turn the referee's body into a bomb. He also uses double face, which means that in the span of seconds, Chrollo demonstrates 3 separate abilities. And then he taunts Hisoka by promising to show him 3 more. "You should be honored," Chrollo says, to set a new record for the number of abilities it has ever taken him to kill someone. This line is very telling. For Chrollo, this fight is not about pride or thrill. It's a calculated execution to deal with Hisoka's pestering once and for all. He's essentially saying, I have come fully intent on your death and I've done my homework. It's the polar opposite of how Hisoka approaches fights, as a dance with an air of spontaneity, moving to his opponent's beat. And Hisoka quickly realizes he's in serious trouble just as Chrollo makes the bold declaration that he is 100% sure of his victory. He unleashes an onslaught of puppet tactics that nullify the close quarters one-to-one combat that Hisoka excels at. Using gallery fake, he generates dozens of copies of the referee's corpse and later many copies of random audience members. With order stamp, he stamps these copies and issues simple commands like break Hisoka, turning them into a mindless horde. To sow confusion, Chrollo also uses convert hands to swap appearances, at one point disguising a copy as himself to mislead Hisoka into attacking the wrong target. And so essentially, Hisoka is left fighting a crowd of puppets in a packed arena while Chrollo slips in and out of the chaos. It's literally a nightmare for someone like Hisoka who craves a direct, exhilarating duel. Chrollo's approach here is to deny Hisoka any fair exchange. Every time Hisoka locates the real Chrollo, another wave of puppets interfere, creating an opening for Chrollo to land hits. When Hisoka tries using severed puppet heads attached to bungee gum as flails, Chrollo not only anticipates it but makes use of the distraction of one flying head to mark another puppet's body with a sun and moon seal unbeknownst to Hisoka. Chrollo fights with zero ego, only efficiency. And so for Hisoka, this fight he pursued for years is deeply disappointing. All his life, Hisoka searches for strong opponents to give him that adrenaline rush of a one-on-one battle, yet Chrollo refuses to give him that satisfaction. Instead of a duel based on individual merit, Chrollo essentially turns the battle into a war of attrition and misdirection. One Hisoka cannot get lost in and enjoy, as he's forced to play mind games and keep track of the countless abilities and tactics at Chrollo's disposal. The use of puppets tells the whole story. Chrollo reduces what could have been the intimate clash of warriors Hisoka so deeply craves into an impersonal execution. So Chrollo Hisoka is just another obstacle to remove for the spider's safety, like an annoying stalker who won't leave them alone, or an infected limb he needs to chop off. The contrast between their characters and ideals is everywhere in this battle. When Chrollo hides among the crowd, he treats innocent bystanders as expendable tools. For a puppet and a person are no different. Hisoka gains nothing from slaughtering nameless extras, he wants the head-on challenge. So Chrollo denying him any direct engagement is a way of crushing Hisoka's ideals along with his body. We see Hisoka's frustration building as he resorts to more desperate measures. He starts literally building a human hammer by clustering puppets together with bungee gum in a last-ditch effort to smash through the mob. It is a grotesque spectacle, dozens of puppet bodies stuck together, and in some ways it serves as a retaliation to Chrollo's mockery of his ideals by turning collective strength into a singular weapon. Yet, even this isn't enough. Chrollo takes one of Hisoka's hands and turns the tide of the battle. He was always in control, but he achieved this by playing hit and run. Now it's his turn to chase as he orchestrates the finale. He sends puppets to every corner of the arena, boxing Hisoka in, and whenever Hisoka tries to escape up into the stands towards the ceiling, Chrollo blocks him by detonating more puppets in his path. And for the final killing blow, the puppets swarm over Hisoka and all explode in unison, consuming him in a massive blast. When the smoke clears, Hisoka lies in a crater, dead. Chrollo's plan was executed flawlessly. He dominated the fight through careful planning, an arsenal of abilities combined into a foolproof plan, and an almost clinical precision to execute upon his vision. Hisoka's renowned combat prowess and improvisation failed against the weight of collectivism and strategy. Hisoka went into this battle for personal pleasure, expecting the ultimate thrill. Instead, he got systematically taken apart in a fight that must have felt hollow to him. Even as he was dying, there's a sense that Hisoka's biggest injury was to his pride and purpose. Chrollo doesn't just defeat Hisoka, he denies him of the very thing he lives for. In their brief exchange toward the start of the battle, Chrollo seemed intrigued that Hisoka still wanted to continue after seeing the extent of Chrollo's abilities. He was fascinated by his stubborn drive. As the observer of human nature that he is, I think Chrollo took this encounter as an experiment in breaking an individual's will. And you'd think Chrollo succeeded. Hisoka's ideals were scorned and he had his dream dangled in front of him. No amount of trickery could overcome Chrollo's web of abilities and pawns. The magician was caught in the spider's web, caught in a prestige he couldn't unravel. Chrollo's fight strategy was the ultimate magic trick, and it killed Hisoka, or at least killed him temporarily. Because as we've seen, Hisoka is not one to accept defeat or death. In true Hisoka fashion, death only fuels his individuality. Moments after the match, as Machi attempts to stitch his corpse out of respect, Hisoka resurrects himself through Nen. By commanding Bungee Gum to manually pump his heart and lungs, he literally forces himself back to life. And upon revival, he is eerily calm. He's shockingly the same as ever, or so it seems. This nonchalant defiance of mortality is the final proof of Hisoka's refusal to be bound by anything, even the natural law of life and death. But he's really not exactly the same. Something quite fundamental has changed in Hisoka following this experience of death, or so it seems. He admits that fighting Chrollo under his ideal conditions, with hundreds of puppets in play, was more than he could chew. A rare moment of humility as he shifts from playful hedonism to cold resolve. He recreates his missing limbs and then, without missing a beat, restrains Machi and delivers a chilling new mission statement. Hisoka declares he will hunt down and kill every member of the Phantom Troop, and he gets to work before Machi can even free herself. 2 down, 10 to go, he muses afterward, like a sing-song killer ticking off a list. Gon is the easygoing jester looking for a fun spar. Hisoka is now transformed into a vengeful force of nature. Chrollo's victory, achieved through collective power and trickery, has provoked Hisoka's wrath. It's as if his ego cannot rest until he obliterates the spider that dared to toy with him. Never in the past would he care to hunt those he deems beneath him like Shalnak or Kotopi, but he must know that this is the way to hit Chrollo where it hurts. The Predator has set his sights on an entire group, not for enjoyment, but for vengeance. 10 to go includes Chrollo. Hisoka no longer pedestalizes him. He is just another leg of the spider to be eliminated. While the troop make plans to regroup, Hisoka ambushes Shalnak and Kotopi in cold blood and makes short work of them. These are less like fights and more like executions, which is exactly how I described Hisoka's defeat. Kotopi is killed in a bathroom, and when Shalnak comes looking for him, he finds Hisoka waiting, who crushes his skull in an instant. The state their bodies are left in is disgustingly artistic, in a fashion similar to Sheila, who was killed all those years ago. Shalnak's corpse is propped in a swing, Kotopi's head placed in front of it, with crows gathering around. Hisoka is sending a message. 2 legs have been eliminated, effectively announcing that the spider hunt has begun. This is a blatant contrast to how Hisoka operated before. Previously, he would only pick fights that promised entertainment or personal interest, but now he's proactively hunting down people who should theoretically provide neither with lethal intent. Hisoka even spared Machi, which is an interesting decision I plan to explore in great detail in a future video, but he still told her to inform the others of his pledge to kill them all. He is operating with a vendetta that now strips away any ambiguity about his role. As of chapter 357, it seemed like Hisoka was a man on a mission, and that this would turn a new leaf for the character and have him abandon all the things that made Hisoka Hisoka. But then chapter 405 comes and Hisoka seems to have reverted to his original state. Ambiguous, fluid, incomprehensible, playing a solo game. It seems like he has other plans on the Black Whale that seemingly have nothing to do with the Phantom Troop. He's in absolutely no rush to hunt them down and doesn't seem too concerned with enacting his vengeance. It's incredibly interesting stuff for him and genuinely ties my brain in knots. I struggle to reconcile 405 Hisoka with 357 Hisoka, so I hope to dedicate a video on his character individually to be released in the near future, where I can explore some of the complex conflicting interpretations of his current frame of mind. Chrollo, upon learning of Hisoka's revival and the murder of his two legs, is absolutely distraught. The family is fractured, and only until they have secured Hisoka's head will they be whole again, able to dine together once more. When Machi suggests that she and Chrollo flip a coin to see who gets the right to kill Hisoka first, Chrollo rejects. Coins are for disputes between two individuals, and this isn't just between him and Machi. Every member of the troupe wants Hisoka dead now, including Chrollo himself. And this highlights Chrollo's continued collectivist stance. Even in personal revenge, he frames it as the will of the whole spider. The Phantom Troupe, which already lost 2 members in Yorknu and now 2 more to Hisoka, is at a crossroads. The band of thieves prioritizing finding their target above even their current heist plans. It's notable that this was their original goal on the Black Whale, as he told Shalnark moments before his death, and it has now been delayed until Hisoka is dealt with. The very first scene of Chrollo following Hisoka's murder of his 2 legs is accompanied by a symbolic omen that doesn't translate well into English. The Phantom Troupe's meeting place on the ship is Hall number 37564, and Togashi deliberately highlights this number. 37564 can be read in Japanese as Minagoroshi, which translates to massacre or kill 'em all. There are several ways to interpret this, of course, but my favorite is as an eerie nod to Hisoka's intentions, essentially spelling out that the spider is fated for annihilation. In Yorknu, Chrollo relied on fortunes to avoid the spider's demise, but now a hidden message in the setting that slips under his radar suggests the spider's massacre is imminent. Hisoka, who earlier defied Neon's prophecy, has now almost become a walking prophecy of death for the Phantom Troupe. Shalnark's Yorknu prophecy is almost identical to his death, which positions Hisoka as fate itself for the Phantom Troupe. And given that Shizuku is no longer with Chrollo and Bono, I am very worried for her. All of this effectively strips Chrollo of the mystique and invincibility he once had, at least in Hisoka's eyes. It's no coincidence that his first victims among the Phantom Troupe were the only 2 members whose abilities Chrollo used in the battle against him, Kotopi's Gallery Fake and Shalnark's Black Voice. What Hisoka picked up on after that fight was Chrollo's ability to use others, and what he's trying to do as a result in order to gain the advantage is to isolate him. Isolate Chrollo, who is already characterized by his distance and coldness. Just as Chrollo planned meticulously to execute Hisoka, the tables have turned. And Chrollo is now on the search for greater abilities to bolster his power even further and ensure the death of Hisoka for good. The troupe is scrambling to find Hisoka on the ship, and Chrollo isn't confident that his current power is sufficient to truly get the job done. In essence, Hisoka has seized the narrative momentum and derailed the spider's fate, which has never been more precarious. So, who really won? Chrollo killed Hisoka, but Hisoka resurrected himself and declared war. Chrollo wanted to protect the spider, but now it's bleeding out, one leg at a time. Hisoka may not have won the battle in Heaven's Arena, but he's winning the war on identity. He has held onto his individuality while destabilizing the collective, fracturing the myth of the spider. Chrollo is left hunting a ghost, his plans shattered, and his followers dwindling. In the end, Hisoka pulled the greatest magic trick of all. He took a loss and made it into a beginning. He turned his death into a message. And like any great magician, he left us questioning the reality of everything we thought we knew. To me, this is Hunter x Hunter at its most brilliant. A story of fate, free will, and the impossible pursuit of control in a world where death laughs last. 2 men, 1 story. And a war between fate and freedom that will ripple through Hunter x Hunter beyond these 2 characters and until its final pages. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was really tough to talk about this dynamic comprehensively without accidentally writing 30,000 words and making another 2.5-hour video, but I'm happy with how it has turned out, even if there's still so much more to talk about, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface of these 2 and their relationship, but still, I did well enough for a 30-40 minute video. My Patreon link is in the description for anybody who wants to support the channel further. There's an exclusive Discord server where you can come hang out, which is available from the lowest $1 tier. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.